All right. Well, I'm going to kick it off. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Natalie Hanlon-Lay, and I am the Chief Deputy Attorney General. And we are thrilled to have everybody here today and such a big group of folks that are interested in data privacy and data breaches. One of the priorities of Attorney General Phil Weiser, when he took office 2 years ago, was really to think about cybersecurity and data privacy. And one of our first initiatives was creating a data privacy cybersecurity impact team, where we gathered all the folks in our office to really look at the various ways at the state level, both with regard to state agencies like our partners, the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, and are also state agencies, that how we could help advise them, as well as how we could protect consumers. And I'm delighted one of our moderators is Mark Bailey, who's a member of that group, who has really led our efforts at the Attorney General's office to try to investigate data breaches and do everything we can do to protect Coloradans and help them. I thought I'd start just with a little intro of thinking about data breaches and at least what our office learned last year. We had 119 data breaches that were reported to our office. There's a statute that requires them to be reported to us. We believe an estimated 1 million or more Coloradans were affected by those data breaches. In 2019, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center ranked Colorado as the 13th highest state for data breaches, with a financial loss of over $65 million due to cybercrime. And from July 1st to December 31st of last year, we made 48 different engagements working with our state agencies to help advise them about cybersecurity and data privacy. This is a big issue that affects everyone, and we are really delighted today to have a number of speakers here who are able to give us a little bit more perspective on what a data breach is, and then sort of some of the impacts of some data breaches, which again, those data breaches that may have happened years ago, and sort of unfortunately what the consequences might be of what people might do with that data, and some of the things that we're trying to do to help consumers today. So with that, the other thing I'd like to mention, this is the second in a 3-part series that we are doing with regard to data privacy. We have an upcoming seminar that I'll just mention for folks. On March 5th, we're going to be doing our sort of cybersecurity toolkit for nonprofits and small businesses. So if after seeing this, you think, gee, I need to think about how to protect my small business a little bit better, we'll have some folks that will be able to address those issues. So with that, let me get on and turn it over to our speakers to talk a little bit more about data privacy and some of the issues that we're facing today.
Hi, everyone. This is Mark Bailey. I am a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the Attorney General's office here in Colorado. And this presentation is about data breaches and identity theft, and about what has happened to a large number of Coloradans with respect to fraudulent unemployment claims. We're going to take each one of those topics in turn, and I'd like to start off just by introducing our panelists and telling you a little bit about what each of them is going to say. We're going to start with Carlin Dornbush. He's the president of American Cybersecurity Management, or ACSM. ACSM provides custom privacy and security programs to businesses to meet the demands of modern threats and emerging compliance. Carlin serves as an IAPP, that's the International Association of Privacy Professionals, Denver Knowledge Net co-chair, ISSA Denver Special Interest Group leader, and he's an active member of the Cloud Security Alliance. Carlin has a CISSP certification. Carlin is going to kick us off today by talking about the question, what is a data breach? A data breach is something that happens in the world, and it's also a legal concept. And he's going to talk about what a data breach is. Then Carlin is going to talk about what businesses and government entities can and should do to protect the information that they have about Colorado residents. And he'll talk about what you as a consumer can do to protect your own information. After Carlin, we're going to transfer to Shamika Walker. And Shamika is, we're really glad to have her from one of our federal counterparts, the Federal Trade Commission. She's a senior attorney in identity theft program management there. During her time at the Federal Trade Commission, she has been involved in investigating and litigating consumer protection cases involving data security, privacy, work at home scams, and telemarketing fraud. Shamika received her law degree from Cornell University and received her bachelor's from the University of Miami. And Shamika is going to give you, after Carlin talks about how to protect yourself from a data breach, Shamika is going to talk about what you can do if your identity has been stolen. What are the next steps you need to take? Finally, we've got two representatives of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. We have the executive director of that agency, Joe Barella, and we've also got Daniel Chase, the chief of staff. Joe and Daniel are going to provide more details about the fraudulent applications for unemployment benefits that resulted from the pandemic. They're also going to talk to you about what CDLE, the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, is doing about that and what you can and should do next. So to kick it off, why don't we start with Carlin. And Carlin, what's a data breach?
Yeah, hey, great question. I've got a couple of slides here I'll share out as well. I think when we look at the definition of a data breach, there's some broad terms out there, and one of those comes from the General Data Protection Regulation. It describes, in a lot of words here, really a broad definition of how any sort of tampering, loss, alteration of that personal data really results in a data breach. Secondly, under HIPAA, there's a definition as well, and it is shorter in definition, but it's very broad as well, and it talks about how that the impermissible use or disclosure of that data can be a HIPAA breach. So maybe you've been ransomwared and that data has not been exfiltrated. That's still a HIPAA breach, just impermissible access, right? And then I encourage people to look at their local state's definition of a data breach, and I think every state now finally has that definition. And Colorado defines it as really an unauthorized acquisition of encrypted computerized data. And so, if the business has lost that data, but it is still encrypted and that encryption key has not been compromised, then they have less reporting duties. However, they still need to go through the right processes to ensure that that data was encrypted. And if we look over time here, thinking back to 2007, that was one of the larger data breaches that occurred at Ameritrade, and 6 million people were impacted by that breach. And if we fast forward, and I'm not going to show all the data breaches, but if we fast forward 10 years, I think we'll remember that Equifax breach that occurred, where 147 million users were impacted. And then we had Marriott with 500 million users. Well, now today, if we've all been paying attention to the news, we've had SolarWinds and SonicWall have issues, and we're no longer calculating it yet in the volume of people impacted. We're still calculating the number in potentially the tens of thousands of businesses that have been impacted by just these two breaches alone. So we're really starting to see this almost hockey stick effect from the volume of breaches that are out there. A great report for folks to look at that comes out every year from Verizon is the Verizon Data Breach Report. And I think this graphic is helpful as it tries to describe the various types of threat vectors that go on and how they have manifest since the past 5 years. Most of this has been resulted of hackers, and these are external actors. They're not internal actors in most cases. A lot of the time, it's crime and even organized crime. And most of these are financially motivated. They're after your identity, which gets them down to your bank accounts and other ways to siphon off funds from various accounts and the businesses themselves. So we've seen an increase of the phishing that's gone on and various other attacks here. And so it starts to map all this out. And this is a great read. And, once again, this is pre-COVID data. So only, about 4,000 of these. However, I think from our data that we're seeing, this is going to be significantly larger when this report comes out in a few months for the 2020 year. And lastly here, around kind of that definition, the IBM does, I think, a really good job of surveying, usually annually, what the cost is of a breach. And they've got this great website out there at ibm.com/security that you can go to, and it has a tool that you can play with as well. And it looks at the number of records. You can turn off and on various controls around if you have a CISO and various other security controls there, and try to gain some a semblance of what a cost might be to your organization. But the average cost right now is running over $3.8 million. And what that means is that for every individual record that you have in that business, it's costing that business around $148. So once again, when we preach good hygiene to our clients, one of those things is data retention and ensuring that you're only storing the amount of data that you need in your organization. And I think it's easy to represent that number of $148 times really the kind of volume of records that people have in their businesses. And it starts to show the level of risk and the volume of risk that they have.
Sorry, I was muted. Obviously, the costs for business are apparent from this slide, and many people watching today have a sense of some of the costs to people who have their identities stolen. So it's all the more important for businesses to take care of the information that they have. Could you talk a little bit about what protection measures businesses can and should be taking?
You bet. I think for the business side, they've really got to make sure that they're taking a data-focused approach to their risk assessments, knowing where their data is, how they've gathered that data, where it's stored, who has access to it, and really building up that risk assessment and that risk profile so they can correctly and appropriately fund the security controls that are needed around that data. We're also starting to see, more and more investment, and I think we still need more investment in actual data security. Businesses need to be considering how they're going to encrypt that data at rest and what level of encryption they need to go to, as well as the key management for those encryption keys. That needs to be really well thought out. More data loss prevention is needed in businesses so they can detect very early on and understand the type of data that could be leaving their organization. And then, of course, identity and access management, ensuring that those controls are in place and that they're regularly reviewed so that that identity and access management is appropriately configured and they don't have inappropriate actors in those environments. And then lastly, the monitoring of these environments and ensuring that the monitoring of the systems that control, healthcare data and our PII and any kind of credit card data is really tight so that they're able to correlate activity and events across the organization and very quickly assess and contain those types of events. Lastly, the education of the employees is really critical. Ensuring that employees are not using their social media passwords for their business passwords is one thing that we see time and time again, and it has really been a prolific culprit of how bad actors are getting into some of these environments. And then, of course, don't click on links. Don't click on those links unless you really know where they're coming from. They came from inside your business. And even in some of those cases, it can be really difficult. So that's I think, the first steps from the business side.
Sure. And that this is just an overview. And an overview would be helpful too about what regular people like me and you can do in our personal lives to protect our own data.
Right. I mentioned earlier the business passwords. There's a great tool out there that we can all use, and it's called Have I Been Pwned, PWNED.com. And you're able to go and take that password that you've used for years and years, or the one that you want to use, and you can put it into this system, and it will detect and tell you if that's a good password or not. It will go back and look at some of those systems that have been compromised over the past few years, and to determine if that actual password had been compromised and had been part of that compromise. So it's really helpful as we start to think about good password hygiene. There are a lot of password management solutions out there, 1Password, LastPass. A lot of these systems are really helpful in generating those new passwords and managing those passwords, because we have so many systems that we get into these days. It's really difficult to have a unique password for every single system that we use, and this helps. One of the things that I do that I put on here is I use a separate email for junk email and things that I think I might be getting spam over, because maybe I wanted to sign up for an activity or an event and I knew I was going to be getting lots of ads. So using that password for those types of purposes is, I think, extremely helpful and helps filter some of that maybe what could become easily nefarious emails into that separate email folder, email account. And then, this is our data, right? And we should be asking these businesses, how are they using our data? Who will have access to our information? So I think it's always in our capability and rights to be pushing back on the businesses. And we should be sharing as little of our information as possible. So when you sign up, and if the form doesn't require you to fill out a field of, say, your birth date and so forth, then maybe consider not filling that out. Maybe it's not really necessary. We should be monitoring our bills and our bank accounts, and at least on a monthly basis, to ensure that we don't have any, errant charges that are being placed in there, and things that might lead us to believe that maybe subscriptions have been put in our name that we haven't wanted. And then, being able to freeze your credit. And I think there'll be more talk about that later. But that's another really good process to go through. And then, of course, don't click on those links in your email. Most of that stuff that's coming to your personal email is most likely fraught with some kind of disaster behind it. So really make sure that you fully vet the email, and you fully vet that link, and ensure that you're not going to get into some sort of situation like just that simple click.
Carlin, some people out there might not really understand what the harm is in filling out an online form and putting in maybe your birth date or information that you don't think is confidential. Or people perhaps don't understand why there's a problem with having a weak password for an account that doesn't have, a financial account tied to it. Can you talk a little bit about what cyber criminals can do with different pieces of information that they pick up through different hacks?
You bet. It really doesn't take much information to determine an individual. And interestingly enough, there are systems out there, and there's been even collections of just your GPS data. And you can go out into the system and you can determine who somebody is just based on their GPS location from their phone. I mean, how often do you go from your house to your office and then to the grocery store, right? So just using that data alone can help somebody determine that it's me at my address. just the information of your first and last name and your birth date and your zip code can really lead to some core identification of an individual. So it really doesn't take much. And what these threat actors do is they access the various systems and they really start to stream this data into these much, much, much larger, complex data systems that are in the dark web that allow other folks to purchase your information and start to really stream all this together. So these are ways that these nefarious actors are building these profiles of us and then using that against us to, for financial gain.
Thanks, Carlin. Why don't we shift gears now from talking about how to prevent your information from being misused to learning a little bit about unemployment insurance fraud and what people who have had their identity stolen can do to protect themselves. Shamika, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Let me share my screen. Okay. So understanding identity theft. As you mentioned, Mark, and as Carlin, you guys alluded to a bit ago, identity theft is like a puzzle made up of pieces of personal information. And like the puzzle, like that could be like your account numbers, that could be your name, your date of birth. All of that stuff can come from data breaches. And so once identity thieves have the pieces that they need, they can use that information to open accounts in your name, to claim your tax refund, to engage in all types of different types of identity theft. And once someone does that, it can have a tremendous impact on your life. So unemployment insurance identity theft. So it's a type of identity theft that can happen as a result of a data breach. And I'll just touch on it, a little bit because I know that Daniel and Joe will discuss it later. But since the pandemic at the FTC, we've heard about like widespread fraud where imposters file claims for unemployment benefits using someone else's name and personal information. And then the payments go to the identity thieves instead of the person whose information was used. And so the fraud is in a number of states, including Colorado, of course. This kind of identity theft has been around for years, but because of the pandemic, it's really increased. And that's because, lots of people lost jobs and then they got enhanced benefits, which makes it very attractive for identity thieves. Some states relaxed their verification process, so it made it easier for identity thieves to get access to this kind of information to begin with. And so also people, because it's tax season, people will be getting their 1099 G tax forms, and that just shows that they have benefits from unemployment insurance benefits. But if you didn't receive it, you need to contact your state because you need a corrected form. You can only file taxes on information or money that you actually received. And so while you're waiting for that corrected form, you should file your taxes based on the income that you actually did receive and not any fraudulent benefits that someone else received on your behalf. The FTC's guidance on what you can do to recover from unemployment insurance identity theft is evolving. But right now we're telling people to report this type of identity theft immediately to your state unemployment benefits office and your employer. You should keep a confirmation of any, keep a documentation of any confirmation you received. And then I'll talk a little bit more about credit freezes, but you should consider freezing your credit as an additional step, because anytime someone has misused your information, a credit freeze is the most important step that you can take to prevent any kind of further identity theft. So I mentioned the pandemic a bit ago, but last year at the FTC, we received about 1.4 million reports of identity theft, which was double the number that we received in 2019. And the data shows that identity thieves targeted government funds that were earmarked to help people who had been hit hard financially because of the pandemic. So unemployment insurance identity theft was a huge driver in the spike in the reports that we saw. And you can see that here in this aqua colored line, how big that spike was. So every category that we have for reports increased, but it was not as dramatic as the one for government benefits. And so that line, the aqua color line, was pretty flat from 2016 to 2019, but then you can see for yourself how it increased. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Carlin thankfully went over a lot of ways that you can avoid identity theft. But one thing I wanted to really mention is that you should continuously monitor your credit reports. That's one of the most important steps you can take to make sure there's no signs of identity theft, like an unauthorized account that's opened in your name, a new address popping up on your personal information. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the FCRA, requires that each of the nation's credit reporting agencies, like Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, provide you with a free copy of your credit report and every 12 months. But now, because we're in a pandemic, you can get a report for free every week through April. So you should get a copy of all three of your reports and check that often to help you identify any new fraud quickly. So if you've experienced any type of identity theft, you should consider placing a credit alert or a credit freezing report. Both options are free, and this slide just shows the difference between the two of them. With a credit freeze, it limits access to your credit report so that no one, including yourself, can open a new account until the freeze is lifted. It's like I mentioned, it's free to place, and it's also free to remove it. And it lasts until you lift or remove it, but it will require you to take a few extra steps the next time you want to apply for credit. And to place a credit freeze on your reports, you need to contact each of the 3 credit bureaus. On the other hand, with a credit freeze, it makes companies verify your identity before granting a new credit in your name. It lasts up to a year, and you have to only contact one of the credit bureaus to place it, and they'll contact the other 2. But which one is right for you really depends on your situation. It's a personal decision, but a credit freeze is generally best for people who aren't planning to take out any new lines of credit. So what happens in the unfortunate event that you do experience identity theft? The FTC and the state of Colorado has some tools that can help you recover. First, I'll start with the FTC. We would highly encourage everyone to visit our website, identitytheft.gov. It's the federal government's one-stop resource for reporting identity theft and getting a personalized recovery plan. The website has a step-by-step recovery plan of more than 30 different types of identity theft. I know we were just talking about unemployment insurance identity theft, but there are dozens of other types that we have a plan for, including child identity theft and tax identity theft. It will walk you through what you need to do to recover. It gives you links to credit bureaus and contact information, pre-filled letters that you might need to send to creditors and other people. So really, it's just a place that we encourage you to go first if you've experienced any kind of identity theft. You can also find out more information about credit freezes and fraud alerts there as well. And as Carlin mentioned, unfortunately, data breaches are really common these days, and they're just another way that identity thieves can get access to your information. So if you've received a notice saying that your personal information was exposed in a data breach, or that one of your online accounts was hacked, please go to identitytheft.gov/data breach. And this website provides you steps that you can take to protect yourself and to recover from identity theft. For example, if your financial account information was exposed in a data breach, you should contact your financial institution right away, close your account, reopen it with new account numbers. And you should also change your login and password number for the affected account. So, I mentioned a lot about what we have at the FTC, but that's because I work here and that's my job. But but also for all of you in Colorado, our friends at the Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection put together a toolkit to help you recover in the event that you experience identity theft. And the toolkit is available in English and in Spanish, and you can find it at stopfraudcolorado.gov. This is consumer.gov. It's a FTC's website for consumer information. It provides consumer protection basics. There you can learn more about getting and checking your credit report. There are also tips and information about scams and more information about identity theft. Finally, the FTC has a new website that makes it easier for you to report any kind of scam or fraud or bad business practice. It's called reportfraud.ftc.gov. It's also available in Spanish. You can go to this website to tell us what happened, and then you answer some questions. You'll get a report, and then you'll get a follow-up from the FTC. But when you report information about scams and other types of fraud to the FTC, it helps us and our law enforcement partners build cases. It helps stop scams, and more importantly, it helps others in the community learn about current fraud trends. So that's all that I have right now. Thanks again for inviting me to speak, and I can answer questions or wait till the end.
I was struck by what you said about how it helps the FTC to build cases when consumers file complaints when there's been identity theft. Can you talk a little bit about how the FTC uses that information?
Sure. So, I mean, we watch the news and hear things like everyone else, but sometimes, we need more details about more information or something that we think we might not have heard about, so we're like, we need to look into this kind of this fraud. So it helps us build our cases in that we know how to target our searches for things. We know where directly, there's so much fraud, unfortunately, in the United States. And we can kind of identify okay, this is a huge issue that we need to focus on. And so we talk to consumers directly, we hear their stories, and then do our own investigations to try to build a case from that.
Great. And we do the same thing at the Colorado Attorney General's office. If you file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission or the Colorado Attorney General, it may not be the case that you're going to get a lawyer who calls you up and can take your case and help you out, right? In fact, that's probably not going to be the case because there's only a few of us and there's millions of people in Colorado and hundreds of millions of people in the country. But when people file complaints, that helps us identify trends. It helps us identify bad actors who are harming a large number of consumers. And so filing a complaint really helps you in repairing your credit and repairing your identity. But it also really helps law enforcement to figure out who are the people that we need to be targeting for further investigations.
And I will say too, it also helps us put out consumer education, right? So we might not be able to have a case or file a case in all the different frauds or things that we hear going on, but we can alert you to scams are going on so that you can protect yourself that way as well.
Right. I know that the FTC is really analyzing that data in a lot of different ways, and probably part of it informed a lot of the materials that you gave people links to as far as what to look out for and what to do to protect yourself. So thanks, Shamika.
Welcome.
Great. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think that might be okay because a number of you all are probably very interested in what has happened with the fraudulent unemployment claims that accompanied the federal relief package. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Joe and Daniel. And if you all could just talk a little bit about what happened and what CDLE is doing and what Coloradans who have been impacted by this should be doing.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Carlin and Shamika, because what you presented to the group is exactly what has happened in Colorado. And so over the last 11 months, with the pandemic unemployment insurance system, as well as state benefits, we have seen information that was obtained by a data breach, that was stolen by criminals, and that identity is being used to fraudulently apply for unemployment benefits here in Colorado. And so that's what we're seeing, just to put a little bit on perspective, and Daniel will talk a little bit more about this, but since the pandemic began in Colorado, we've seen just over 1 million valid claims in the system, people who have been impacted, their work has been impacted, that are eligible for unemployment insurance, and we've paid benefits to those individuals. We've seen over 1.1 million potentially fraudulent claims. Our system is holding or has held claims because of they've triggered identity triggers we have in the system Before the pandemic started, we probably had less than 5 triggers in the system, but because of the pandemic unemployment system, the rampant fraud, we now have over 50 triggers that could trigger a hold on a case. And so, as you would imagine, the amount of resources and time that goes into fraud detection, fraud prevention, and investigation and enforcement is competing with our main mission is getting out benefits to people who really need financial assistance because of a wage loss. And so kind of setting that picture for you. Before the pandemic and before this economic crisis caused by the pandemic, fraud at the Department of Labor and Employment really consisted of someone who was double dipping illegally, someone who was working and thought, oh, maybe I can get unemployment and apply for unemployment assistance at the same time. That really was the scope of our fraud work for the most part. But with data breaches, that information easily accessible by criminals, we now have a new fraud system that we need to set up. And so we have aggressively been trying to prevent and combat fraud. And Daniel's going to talk a little bit more about what the department has experienced, why we saw this with the CARES Act implementation, and really the sense of our leaders, the national government, state leaders wanting to get financial benefits into people's hands as quickly as possible. So Daniel, I'm going to open it up to you to present.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you, Shamika and Carlin, for your information on identity theft. I think, you know, if victims of unemployment insurance fraud leave this video with any message, it's that the true issue at play here is that your identity is compromised, and that's where the harm will come to you and your family because of that identity theft and because of the things that the criminals can do outside of just filing an unemployment insurance claim with us. They can do many more harmful things, and the unemployment insurance claim won't do much to your identity, but those other things will. So I'm just going to give people, I know there's a lot of people out there who are wondering what happened, how is this fraud impacting the system? What is the Department of Labor doing to prevent this from paying out and from paying criminals? And you know, what can I do as a victim of unemployment insurance identity theft fraud moving forward? So just to give a little background as to the issue of unemployment insurance fraud, we started noticing a trend in our systems starting in June of 2020. If you recall, the CARES Act was passed in March and created what's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance System, which allows people who were not otherwise eligible for unemployment to collect benefits like gig workers, independent contractors, and others that wouldn't have been eligible otherwise. This created a system that didn't have many checks and balances in place like our standard UI system does have. And so we started to see a massive uptick in claims in this system that didn't correspond with any kind of public health orders or anything that would explain that other than fraudulent claims being filed. And it's important to note that this isn't just Colorado. This is happening in all 50 states at the same levels that Colorado's seeing, often higher levels than Colorado's seeing, because we were one of the earliest adopters of fraud detection during the pandemic. So the problem that we're finding, like Joe said, this is a new type of fraud. Our systems are based on the idea that a social security number is truly sacrosanct. It's not known by everyone. So when you have a social security number, that to us in the past was a verifiable sign that this identity is in fact correct. As Carlin alluded to, the data breaches that we've seen, Marriott, Equifax, et cetera, these social security numbers are no longer private data points for people. They are known to criminals, they're known on the dark web, and they are easily accessible for people to use them for these kinds of things to do. We started, as I said, we started seeing this in June, so we started cracking down early on. We implemented one of the most robust and first fraud detection systems in the states that really looked at our pandemic unemployment assistance system and tried to weed out all of the fraudulent claims while also trying to identify those legitimate claims that may be caught up in our net, because we have to cast a pretty wide net. As those programs started to expire as of December 26th, we started to notice that shift into the state UI system. So this is where those that are on this call that are employers within the state of Colorado that have seen this hitting their systems a lot harder. This is where you started to see it shift into your businesses and your employees, because that state UI system, it wasn't an easy target because we notify the employers when a claim is filed automatically. So that becomes its own check against that fraud, because the employer can then let us know that that's a fraudulent claim. So we started to see a huge spike in the state UI system. In January, we launched a modernized state UI system. So it was modernized with all the bells and whistles that we had in our pandemic unemployment system. And so in January, we started a hard crackdown on the state UI system, and we implemented all 50 triggers that Joe talked about earlier in our state UI system to try to catch all those fraudulent claims as well. And to this date, that system is running those triggers daily to check for fraudulent claims. And I'll get into that here in just a minute. Just to talk about the scope of this, like Joe said, we have well over 1 million claims that have been filed in the state of Colorado that are likely fraudulent. So we have them all on a payment hold as a result of suspected fraud, and a mere fraction of a percent of those people that we have implemented a payment hold on have actually contacted us to get us to release it. So what that's showing us is that 1 million number is likely truly fraudulent claims that are being filed in our system. Our strategy here at CDLE and the Department of Labor, we're not at a point where we can prevent a fraudulent claim from being filed in our system. We're not at a technical point to get that set up. We're working towards that as a goal, but right now our true method at attacking this is to prevent payment from going out on fraudulent claims immediately upon being filed. So what this looks like for us, we have 50 different indicators of a fraudulent claim. We run all 50 of those against every single claim in our system every single day. And if any one of those 50 triggers is set off on a claim, a payment hold is automatically set on that claim until further investigation takes place. The other thing that we've implemented, which many of you have done since you got an invite to this webinar, is we've implemented a form online on our website, coloradoui.gov, and under the fraud prevention page. We've implemented a form for people to fill out and notify us of a fraudulent claim. In the past, before we modernized our state UI system, that was a very slow process for us to set holds on those accounts. It was a manual process that we had staff working day and night to set those holds. Now, with our modernized system, once you report a claim on that form, we're going to automatically set a payment hold on that claim, and it will not pay out again until further investigation takes place on that. So that's a big tool in our arsenal. The reason employers are so aware of this issue is because when a claim is filed within our state UI system, all employers that have had contact with that employee within the last year and a half are automatically notified that a claim is filed in that employee's name and using their personally identifiable information. So employers have become one of our best assets in getting the word out to victims that their identities have been stolen. So the problem that we're facing is we don't have contact information for victims until they file that fraud report form on our website. The best thing that we can do is continue to notify employers and use their networks to notify those workers that their identities have been stolen. If the worker doesn't get mail at their house indicating a fraudulent UI claim or other things that may indicate that's what's happening. So we continue to ask employers to assist us on that side of things to make sure that these workers are notified that their identities have been compromised, make sure they know what their resources are. Our website, the fraud report form, the resources Shamika talked about in terms of getting their identities locked down and protecting themselves moving forward. So what should victims and employers know? So Shamika talked a lot about this. Fraud alert on your credit, invest in credit monitoring is the big thing that's being recommended by experts. We're also partnering with the Attorney General's office to get their resources out because we're not the experts on identity theft. We at the department never have been the experts, so this is new to us as well, just as it is to you guys. So we are leaning on our partners, the AG's office, to help us get this message out to people and get the resources in their hands. We also need victims to report this on our website, coloradoui.gov again. That way, if for whatever reason the claim got through our detection system, we can set a hold on it and make sure that that's a confirmed fraudulent claim so that no payment goes out on that. The one thing we've started seeing, and Shamika referred to it earlier, is the 1099-Gs. So these are documents that we as the department will send out to all claimants, indicating how much they received in benefits and the taxes they owe on those benefits, as that's taxable income. What we're seeing now is we're seeing victims receiving 1099-Gs for benefits that they never received and never applied for. We now have a form stood up on our website for victims to notify us of that. As Shamika said, the current guidance from the IRS is that you file your taxes on the income you actually received, not on the income that's identified on that 1099-G. As we work through those reports on our website, what our plan is to send you a corrected and zeroed out 1099-G, which will also notify the IRS that you actually don't owe us any money. And so that will fix up the tax issue so that you're not liable for those taxes. On the employer side, the message, other than please help us notify victims, our message to employers right now is if benefits are paid out, we're not going to charge that to your account. And if we do charge that to your account, we'll come back around and reimburse you if that takes place. And the other thing is any benefits that we pay out on our side on behalf of an employer that are confirmed fraudulent, we will not be charging your experience rating. So employers can rest at ease. Once we process through, I'm not going to lie, this is a lot of claims we're processing. We're working through them and we will make those corrections on the back end for employers. So with that, Mark, that's all I've got, but happy to answer any questions or clarify anything that down the road.
Hey, Daniel, thank you. Great job. Just want to make sure it's really clear that there's opportunities for you to, as a worker or an employee, go online and fill out the fraud form if you think your identity has been misused. As an employer, go online and fill out the fraud form if you think your employee's identity was stolen. Inform your employers. If you get a 1099-G, go online and fill out the form. That is the fastest way to take care of that. If you're trying to call our call center is really designed for benefit administration and payment. And that's right now in Colorado, we still have over 280,000 people on unemployment insurance that really need to get questions that's holding up legitimate payments out the door that they need to handle. So by asking questions about fraud or trying to talk to someone about fraud, it's preventing those people who actually need benefits from getting the help they need to get those benefits out the door as quickly as possible. So I know as a victim of identity theft, you feel like you've been violated, and you have, but we have ways for you to take care of that and report that online. And I strongly encourage you to make sure you're doing it online, or you're going to get frustrated because you can't get through to the call center as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Joe, I think it would be helpful. Do you just want to give that URL? People can Google it, but.
Sure, it's coloradoui.gov.
Great. That's where you can go and notify CDLE of this. And that's a really key first step for everyone, if that wasn't clear enough already. We did receive a number of questions in advance of the presentation. I want to kind of throw these out to anyone in the group who feels like they've got a good answer. One question we had was, where was my information stolen from? How did this happen? Do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'll take a first start at it, which is, back in 2017 when Equifax was hit, that data made its way onto the dark web, and it's been sitting there, and it's been used, and it's been sold, and it's really just become highly available to all these nefarious actors. And then when a situation arises where something like a pandemic or other natural disasters occur, these threat actors go to work, and they try to be crafty and think of ways that they can either gain more identity or they can apply that identity for financial gain. And unfortunately, this is one of those situations where the federal government tried to rush this money out, and so now this data is now being applied that way.
And
if I could just add, and Daniel, you may be able to put in the chat, there's a really good article that the USA Today put out in December that actually interviews someone from Nigeria that is a criminal that is using purchased information from the dark web that costs $2 per PII, and then applying that as many times they can throughout the country for unemployment insurance fraud, not just in Colorado, but in every state in the country. The previous administration, the Secretary of Labor, mentioned that probably when this is all over, and this was in the fall of last year, there could be up to $70 billion in fraud paid out in the unemployment insurance system. And so this is a tremendous problem that's happening. And so just wanted to put that out there. But if that's a really good article, so you can tell how it's actually happening and how someone is getting that data breach PII and then using it for criminal gain, financial gain.
Daniel, you talked a little bit about the federal tax forms that some people are getting, the 1099-G forms. And just to put a finer point on it, this is when someone steals your identity to get unemployment benefits in your name. You have no idea it even happened until the government asks you to pay taxes on that money. Extremely frustrating for people. You talked about the fact that CDLE is going to be sending out corrected 1099-Gs that clarify that, in fact, you were a victim of fraud and that you did not have this income. Couple of questions on that. When can people expect to receive their corrected 1099-G forms? And do they need to wait to receive those before they file their taxes?
That's a question I'm getting a lot. And the answer is, for now, I don't know. And the reason is because we've only had that form up for a few weeks. So we're still gauging the kind of volume. We're going to get into that. But as we mentioned earlier, the current guidance from the IRS is that you can go forward with filing your taxes, again, based on the income you receive. So for you, if you're a victim of unemployment fraud, in theory, you didn't receive any income from us. So you would go ahead and file your taxes as that. And then once we do get around to sending you a 1099-G, we can get that out to you and you can have that for your records in case the IRS comes back asking for that. Now the problem with everything in our world right now in terms of unemployment insurance, we're in the law of big numbers. Everything we do is in big numbers. So for us, it's fraud is at 1 million claims, and we've never seen that before in the unemployment insurance system. We expect the law of big numbers to still apply to the 1099-Gs. So I can't give a timeline just yet, but please fill that out for us so that we do get you that corrected 1099-G as soon as we can.
What should people do who need unemployment, really need it, but they can't get their application filed because someone has already filed a fraudulent claim in their name? What do you recommend that people like that do?
Yeah, we're working through that issue now. Again, still law of big numbers. So what we need to do is we internally have to strip out that fraudulent claim to allow you in there to file, because all claims are under your social security number. So if you tried to go in there right now to file a claim and there's a fraudulent claim on file, it would kick you out and say, nope, you already have a claim on file. You need to access that claim through your account. You'll need to get in contact with us. We're trying to stand up a form soon on those because we are seeing that with as many identities that have been stolen. We're seeing that more and more common as we continue on through this pandemic. So we're hoping to address that. It's just one of those that is on our list to address, and we're hoping to get that figured out here soon.
And Mark, I just want to add, these are the true victims of this identity theft and its criminal use. Someone who really is impacted, lost wages or their job, and now needs to file for benefits, and they find out that perhaps someone has used that identity and we put a hold on it. Perhaps someone used that identity 40 times in 40 different states, and there's a hold everywhere. So those are the true victims that we know it's a priority of ours to make sure that we can handle that. But we're working on that.
Thanks, Joe and Daniel. What should people do if they get a 1099-G form that has someone else's name on it? It's delivered to their address, or if they get a Relia card that's delivered to their address, but it has someone else's name on it. And as I say this, you maybe should explain what the Relia cards are too. But the question is, if you get something sent to your address with someone else's name, what should you do?
So both the Rely card and the 1099-G is going to addresses that are not the claimants or the victims is a sign of fraudulent activity. So for those, we ask that you report those through our website, coloradoui.gov. We do have an option when you go into that report fraud form. Hey, I received documentation or a Rely card or any of those things in the mail that didn't have my name on it. So that is an option that we offer there. The Rely card is the default debit card that goes out to all unemployment insurance claimants. An account is made in their name so that we can deposit benefits onto that card. But what we do in the state of Colorado is we allow claimants to switch to a direct deposit account of their choosing prior to receiving any benefits. So you might think, well, I have the Rely card. What's the point of these criminals filing these claims? And what they do is they then update to a direct deposit account, either in their name or even in the victim's name, and collect money into that account from the unemployment insurance system.
Great. We had questions from people who are asking, why is my employer being targeted? Why are people calling or contacting my employer? Can you talk a little bit about that, Joe or Daniel?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, that's the one part that a claimant or a criminal cannot control. So when they file a UI claim through the state UI system, what our system does is it takes the social security number and it looks at any employers that have reported wages on that SSN. Many people may not know, but employers are required to report all W-2 wages to us quarterly on all employees. And so we have that data in our system already. So when those wages are reported to us, we then look at that claim, we link that claim to those wages, and we then send out a notice to that employer all automatically. This is all automated. Again, the criminal cannot control that. What the criminal can do is they can add employers to that claim and say, I worked for all these people. And that might trigger additional fact finding out to other employers. And we have seen that, though that's not a very lucrative way to target our system, because you still have to have those wages on file from that employer to be able to receive benefits from them. So it's not something the criminal can control. And it's definitely one of the best tools we have in our arsenal to detect this fraud is when an employer is notified, when they know that the victim is still working for them and there's no reason they would have applied for unemployment.
So in fact, if your employer has been contacted, sounds like that's actually good news, because that means that it's been flagged potentially and the payments can be stopped.
Yeah, it gives us another way to catch that claim. Again, if it gets through our 50 triggers, then it gets to an employer can say, nope, this is fraudulent, and then it gets to us to stop payments. So it's definitely a good tool in our arsenal.
Great. Looks like we've got 1 minute, so I'll ask one more question. People ask, what are they supposed to do if they can't log in to CDLE's new system, if they're having a hard time unlocking their account or getting an ID Me account?
Yeah, so the first step on any locked claims for us, so again, we've had to cast a wide net. We've had to really go out there to try to catch all these fraudulent claims, but we do know that there are legitimate legitimate claimants being caught up within that system. And so the first step is to go online to our website, coloradoui.gov. You're going to see a web alert at the top that talks about program integrity holds. So when your account is locked, you have a program integrity hold on that account, and you need to go through the process within that. And we need to verify your identity first, and then we will do some more investigation to verify we can unlock that claim, or, as I mentioned earlier, possibly strip out that fraudulent claim so we can get you, the victim, a legitimate claim set up within our system. If for whatever reason it takes us time to get that legitimate claim set up, please know we can make that retroactive if that is a concern for people. We can backdate that as far back as we need to. So.
And Daniel, it's important to note again, just as I said with the employers, if you could use the online tools to do that, you're going to be able to self-help yourself and get that done. And so we've tried everything we can where we can let people help themselves online. They can do that to prevent them from getting frustrated by not being able to access the call center.
Well, I think that data breaches over the last several years have been in the news, and many people maybe ask themselves the question, why does this matter? And why does data security and privacy matter? And a lot of Coloradans now are beginning to understand why. I want to say thank you to Daniel and Joe and Shamika and Carlin for taking the time, and also to the staffs of the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment for all the work they're doing in a really, really difficult time, and for the staff of the AG's office who put this together. I want to say a special shout out to Chelsea Kelleher, who's a lawyer in our office who made this event, made it happen seamlessly. On March 5th, we'll be hosting another event with CDLE that's focused on employers. We'll be providing guidance, a little more detailed guidance on data security for businesses, and we'll also be answering questions that employers might have about the recent unemployment fraud. That invitation will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And with that, that'll conclude the program. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.